Warp Corporation Outis is the newest addition to our charge team roster, and her identity claims that she is the captain. I've decided to check if she deserves that rank by reviewing her here today. Welcome to the Warp Corp Outis review. First of all, let's take a look at her skills. Outis is the only 3-star warp identity with blunt damage on her skills, which makes her stand out among the slash and pierce focused identities of Warp Corporation that have been released before. Interestingly enough, her skill 3, Rip Dimension, is still a slash skill, so she doesn't provide fantastic blunt coverage, and still falls into the big ultimate slash attack category of identities that Roshu and Dawn reside in. Her skill 1 is Ripple, with 3 base power and 2 coins with 4 coin power. It gains base and clash power with charge, and if you manage to hit the second coin, it can give Outis 4 total charge. With all the buffs active, Ripple can reach 14 power in a clash, making it the strongest skill 1 out of all of the warp identities in a clash. This is really good, considering the skill is the main way for Warp Outis to gain charge, and part of the charge gain requires you to hit the second coin, which you can't do without high clash power. Her second skill is Charged Leap, and this is where Outis becomes really different from other charge identities. This skill has a base power of 5 and 2 coins with the coin power of 6. Unlike most other warp identities, which strictly gain charge from their skill 2, Outis actually consumes 6 charge to improve her Charged Leap. When the charge consumption is in effect, the clash power of the skill can rise up to 19, which is the same as the buffed leap of Warp Dawn, and 1 power less than the leap of Warp Roshu at its first stage of buffs. However, unlike those two abilities, Outis only needs 6 charge to buff her Charged Leap, meaning she can reach that 19 power faster than others, which may prove vital in combat. But Charged Leap doesn't just consume charge count. If you hit both coins, you gain the 6 charge count that you used to improve the skill back, and if charge has been consumed, Outis and 2 other allies will gain Charge Barrier. If you're unfamiliar to how Charge Barrier works, this might just seem like a worthless shield. But instead, this is another mechanic that helps Outis gain more charge and support a charge team. When a turn ends, all characters have their Charge Barrier turn into charge count, which means that with enough charge count on herself when using Charged Leap, Outis can easily give her teammates upwards of 6 charge every turn, provided you keep using Charged Leap. This skill also inflicts Bind, but who cares about Bind, am I right? The third and strongest skill of Warp Captain Outis is Rip Dimension. It has 4 base power with 4 coins with 3 coin power. It has a combat start effect, but we'll get to that a bit later. On use, she has an ability similar to that of Warp Roshu, where her skill has 2 stages of activation. At 7 to 14 charge count, she gains the full strength of her skill 3, which makes its power go up to 24, but doesn't activate the additional abilities. At 15 charge or more, the skill also inflicts 3 Rupture. Okay, I don't think you ever need to wait for 15 charge. Now back to combat start. When Captain Outis uses her skill 3, she grants herself and a certain amount of allies based on resonance a new effect called Load. Load is effectively a weaker damage up that only works on skills that consume charge. It grants 2.5% damage per stack and is twice as effective when used on a Warp Corp identity, stacking up to 6 times. The amount of load given to allies is determined by the charge potency that Outis has, not count. This means that a lot of the time, Rip Dimension will only give 1 or 2 load, sometimes going up to 3, but you will only reach the maximum of 6 in extremely long battles, due to how Outis accumulates charge potency. Now that we're done with her skills, let's move on to her passives. Her combat passive, Overcharge Cleanup Order, is active with 3 envy materials owned, and is the source of Warp Outis' access to charge potency. For every 10 charge count consumed by Outis in an encounter, she gets 1 more charge potency. At the end of a turn, she gives 1 Clash power up to the amount of Warp Corp allies equal to her charge potency, maxing out at 5. This means that in long battles, once Outis has used 50 charge, she will grant all Warp Corp units except one plus 1 Clash power. Her support passive, Refraction, is powerful as well. It grants plus 10% damage to the ally with the most charge count, whenever they consume more than 7 charge count with their attacks. Now that we have the whole kit of Warp Captain Outis figured out, we can find out what she excels at. And unsurprisingly, she ends up being a great support for Warp teams, and for Warp Roshu and Dawn specifically. These two identities focus on quickly gaining charge and firing off their third skills for massive slash damage. Warp Captain Outis can aid them in both of those processes with her skills. Charged Leap provides allies with Charge Barrier, which turns into more charge count. It specifically targets two characters with the lowest charge count, so you can replenish Roshu's and Dawn's count after they use their third skills if you time the skill correctly. Rip Dimension also serves as a great support tool, as using it on the same turn as any of the strong warp skill trees allows for load to be activated and increase the power of said skill tree by a sizable margin, if enough charge potency is accumulated. As for teams that can utilize W Outis, it's not as easy as for other warp identities. She doesn't have the strength or self-containment to be used as a damage dealer, unlike Roshu or Dawn. And while she does inflict a little bit of Rupture, it's not enough to give her a place in Rupture teams, unlike Yi-Sang. This means she's stuck in dedicated charge teams, which could change with the release of Dimension Shredder for her, but is still not the end of the world, considering how powerful those teams are. As for pros and cons, I'd say that Warp Captain Outis provides blunt damage coverage for charge teams, helps them gain charge quickly, and grants great damage and power bonuses at the peak of her skills. But on the other hand, she takes a very long time to fully set up, and at times can lack damage. She's also not versatile enough to use outside of one team composition, so she might not be a priority to get for new players. And on this note, I'd like to conclude the character review of Warp Outis. She's a lot better than people think, but she's still far from the best charge identity. If you disagree or have something to add, feel free to leave a comment explaining your thoughts. And if you watched until the end, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you when new identities are released. Goodbye!